Resolution number 9, entitled Returning Guantanamo Bay to Cuba. The mover is Cuba, the second is China. There is already one speaker listed on the resolution, El Salvador. Call upon those first and see who else wants to introduce today. To move the resolution on the returning of Guantanamo Bay to Cuba, the ambassador from Cuba.
The Republic of Cuba stands before you today in solidarity against the great devil to the north, the American imperialist agenda, the American imperialistic agenda has stood unwavering in their attempts to assert dominance and absolute control over Latin American and Caribbean nation activities since the Monroe Doctrine. The illegal occupation of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba is an exceptional example to the United States' ability to take advantage and ignore sovereign nations' rights and subsequent calls for justice. The Cuban delegation has come to the General Assembly for help, having exhausted all other options to resolve this issue peacefully and justly through the American State Department. This, however, is not possible, as the American dictators have cut off all diplomatic ties to Cuba over one little misunderstanding we had in 1962.
This issue reaches as far back as the 1980s, as the 1880s, I apologize. In 1888, the United States of America entered a conflict which their Secretary of State, John Hay, would, even after the death of thousands of Americans, call a splendid little war. While the Spanish-American War led to what some would call the liberation of Cuba, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico, these islands' struggle for independence did not end when the peace treaties were signed and still persists today. Looking back, it's painfully obvious why the United States found this war so splendid. Imperialist intervention by the United States was the price Cuban revolutionaries were willing to pay in return for U.S. assistance and the establishment of complete independence and sovereignty in the region. Sadly, this trade-off never happened. The United States imperialism shrouded the Cuban government during the time when it needed autonomy the most, during the development of its post-liberation constitution. Influencing said constitution was the Platt Amendment, a measure which the United States strong-armed the government of Cuba into adopting. The terms of the Platt Amendment allow the U.S. to intervene unilaterally in Cuban affairs and mandates military bases on the island, including Guantanamo Bay. The actual lease contract between Cuba and the U.S. requires both parties to agree upon relinquishing Guantanamo after decades of Cuban requests that the United States continues to refuse to comply with. Since the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1959, the Cuban government has argued that the United States' retention of Guantanamo is unlawful due to the extremely unfavorable circumstances under which it was obtained. These circumstances, such as the threat of force by the United States, make the maintenance and upholding of such an agreement a direct violation of the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties. Moreover, the treaty and its renewal agreement stipulate that the base is to be used for coaling and naval purposes only. The United States has used the base for much more, including the holding of Cuban and Haitian refugees, detention facilities, torture, and unlawful military tribunals. In a futile attempt to repay Cuba for the human rights violations conducted on their rightful soil, each year since 1959, the U.S. sends our government an insulting sum of $4,000, a check which our leaders have not only abstained from cashing, but have publicly destroyed.
Mr. President, I have here in my hand the check for $4,000 from the American delegation. We don't want any. For the last time, Cuba reaffirms that we want nothing to do with the actions taking place place on Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. The Republic of Cuba does concede, however, that the United Nations General Assembly does not have the power to enforce the United States to follow through. This is why we've decided to ask nicely and further politely, and also prefer an apology, language which we hope you all will agree on. I would like to remind the Assembly that this resolution is actually so uncontroversial and lacking in teeth that even the United States might consider voting yes. Seriously, this resolution is equivalent to writing a strongly worded letter at the United States. Please let us usher in a new era where communism no longer has to yell, and help us pass this resolution.